Okay, good afternoon. Today's date is August 17. Welcome to the City of Indio and your Water Authority study session. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Holmes?
Present.
Councilmember Miller?
Present.
Councilmember Ramos Amit is currently absent. Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz?
Sorry, present.
And Mayor Furman.
Present. If I could ask everyone to stand us and ask Mr. Curtis to lead us in the pledge, if you may.
Place your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment?
None, Mayor.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 4, discussion items. 4.1, discussion on citywide sponsorships and grant policy.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Scott Trujillo, your Deputy City Manager. So let's talk all things funding. Our goal here today is to determine the process and criteria for different types of funding requests that come to the city. So I'll tee it up by saying that there's really nothing complicated and complex about the topic. However, this is one of those items that's very nuanced with different categories, if you will. So without further ado, we'll jump right into this because I know we have a second item as well during the study session. So there's a real rationale to update the policy based upon this. So we're trying to establish a streamlined and formalized process for all funding requests. So I initially titled this grants and sponsorships, but it's really all funding requests because there's other categories that are included as well. All the requests granted should come from one fund. Right now, it's in several different areas, from community services, city manager's office, council, et cetera. There's also a need for applications to be received in one place as well. This will allow for less overlapping of funding. So if someone were to come to myself on one item, I go ahead and fund it out of one budget, and then they go to Jim Curtis on another one. There could be some possible duplication as well. It allows for easy and efficient tracking. And we're also looking to do like a committee review, which would allow for more equitable distribution. Rather than have kind of one or two sets of eyes on these, it would be a panel of 5, that I'll get into in a moment. So all funding requests routed through this application process, that's probably the big one right there. And as you recall, the FPPC passed a new requirement back in December of 21 that any requests that come at the request of council, that you have to report those. So if you just were to refer them through this process, then you would not have to report those. Now, here's the good news. We have an existing resolution that identifies our process through this. So we have good bones. We don't have to reinvent the process here. So this slide essentially covers what is entailed, and I left you a hard copy as well. And if we need to bring it up for a soft copy for council or Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz, we can do that as well. But it already identifies monetary assistance, sponsorships, fee waivers, and in-kind contributions. If I can back up a little bit, in 2011, we passed a resolution identifying these things. And in 2013, when Councilmember Holmes was mayor, we updated that to this existing resolution in 2013. And what was changed from 2011 to 2013 is we included fee waivers and in-kind contributions. So we just expanded it, if you will. So here we are in 2022. We're going to kind of expand it and a bit more and have a little more formalized process. It identifies currently right now that we're not to exceed $5,000 per request. In-kind services are up to $25,000 per year. Now, the eligibility, I do like the language. I'd like to keep this in there because it identifies any nonprofit or governmental entity that will benefit the city or its residents by, and this is pretty inclusive, and this captures quite a bit. Enhancing the quality of life or the delivery of services in Indio. Love that. Strengthening the business community in Indio. Love that. Supporting the city's overall economic development program. Love that as well. And enhancing Indio's marketing capacity and recognition in the region. So if that's the eligibility criteria, it's all encompassing, if you will. There's another element in there that talks about a written reports required within 60 days of the event. I'll be quite frank with you. We've not followed up with those. We received the requests that come through. We fund them, but the written report has not come forward. So we want to implement that as we move. So here are some of the recommended changes. So we set a total annual funding of $100,000 in addition to $25,000 for in-kind services. So the in-kind services doesn't really change. Then we offer 4 funding rounds per fiscal year. So if you recall, the way that the grants and sponsorships work right now is we release an application usually in August, and then they have until September to turn around. And then we cut the check to them. And that is only about $45,000 that we do. So that's the formalized process now, that how people get it. But rather than have it once a year, let's open this to 4 times per year. And I'll get to the calendar and so forth on the next slide. And then what we'd like to do is have all applications received in one place. And I figured we just set up something that like funding@indio.org that could go to Kristen Smith, our admin assistant in the city manager's office, to receive all these. So we're going to streamline these. And then we want to have a funding review committee. Now, we hemmed and hawed over this for a bit in terms of the makeup of this. We looked at other cities and how they do it and so forth. And we figured that the mayor pro tem, as we rotate, could sit on this review committee along with the city manager, the deputy city manager, and the community services manager as well, getting those 5 sets of eyes on all of these applications. So the next item, and we want to include all table sponsorship requests, as you guys can imagine, because a lot of them go to you first. We want to include them. We've never included them as part of this process, but we would love to include them in there as well. So now there's my little smiley face on that last bullet point. So route everything through here. No circumventing the system. This really begins with council's buy-in. There are some things we could do administratively under the existing resolution and so forth, but the most important part is that policymakers want to come before you and have you set some of these parameters. So those are some of the bigger items, if you will, that we have. So a typical funding calendar year would look like this. In July, the entire month of July, that's round 1. That's when they have to submit the applications. They have, in that case, 31 days to submit. And then that blue type week that's highlighted, that's the committee review and decision time. So we'll sit there in that during that week and review all the applications that come through. And then we can actually turn around and distribute those checks the week after, as long as we get our finance director's buy-in on that for that turnaround time. Just so you're aware, other cities have a similar process, but they all take the final decision back to the city council for final decision. I'll give you one example. This really extends the timeline though. In the city of Palm Desert, if you have an application period between December to February 15th, if you get in that window, your funding doesn't come to you until July. So they have to wait all that time for them to go through this process. We want to be much more nimble to the community and responsive to those needs. So the next funding round in this case would be in October. They have the full month of October. And then the review committee meets in November and cut those checks. And then again in January, and then again in April. So we give them a big window, if you will. So they have 4 full months to get these applications in. And the reality is, if their event is in June of 23, let's say, they're welcome to apply immediately. They don't have to wait for that final round. And so that's one of the decision points you'll need to make today is whether or not how do we divvy up the pie? Is it $25,000 per round, or is it kind of first come, first serve? So there's some pros and cons to that. But this is the recommended calendar of how we want to proceed. Now, other considerations, and I can kind of help guide with some of this, but I'd like to open this up for dialogue as well. So what if an agency receives CDBG funding? Are they eligible? And just to start off, I'll give you some of my thoughts. And I think the response would be that they're not eligible. We have a finite amount of money, And if they're receiving some city funding via that mechanism, then let's keep this for others. But again, this is your call. Eligibility of individuals, for example, individual scholarships. Right now, the resolution does not allow for that. All the other cities that I looked at, La Quinta, Palm Desert, Coachella, Palm Springs, they don't allow for individuals to apply through these types of grants. So my recommendation would be no, we don't do that. Okay, so this individual seats versus a full table sponsorship. I sat down with Shelley Solis, who gets inundated with these requests, and she chases these throughout the year, and it's rather time consuming. So here's a thought. Let's just say, let me think who I can pick on. Let's say the rescue mission has a table that they want to fill. They'll actually apply for this through this process. And then what we do, if I can go back, you see that first week, let's take the first week of August. There's nothing that occurs during that time. Shelley could send out an email to First Council, directors, maybe even all city personnel, open it up to who wants to sit at that table. If we only get 3 people that sign up to sit at that table, we only buy 3 seats. We don't buy the full table. If we fill up the table, then we'll do the full table sponsorship. So that may be an option as well, whether we do a full table or rather than just say, no, we're not going to do anything, we can just do individual seats. So the next item I mentioned a moment ago, which is that $25,000 allocated per round. So we're going to stick, round one's only up to 25, or is it a first come, first served basis? My recommendation would be that we use the $25,000 as a guideline, but we don't set it and restrict it to just 25. For example, our community is used to receiving the applications and grants during the month of August and September. So we're going to have a higher influx during that time. So if we allocate $50,000 during that first round, that's okay because we won't receive that many in subsequent rounds as well. So the requirement of the written report, I would like to keep that in there. I think that speaks to accountability of these agencies as they receive this funding. So we will follow up on that. Major donations. This was another kind of a nuanced thing. Well, we get requests of $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 requests. Is that something that we want to incorporate as part of this process? And my recommendation would be no. We actually bring those back for council consideration during the budget season. So, but again, that's up to you. Do we increase or decrease that $5,000 cap? Some of these table sponsorships, for example, are $7,500. My recommendation is we keep it right at $5,000. There's a finite amount of money, and we keep it at the $5,000. So the next item, do we identify an annual budget? Do we actually put it in the reso of $100,000? My recommendation is we don't. There's going to be some years. It's going to be based upon availability of funding. So sometimes we're doing better than other years, and so we have to cut back. So I'd hate to hold us to a certain dollar amount, and we can increase or decrease that accordingly. The funds cannot be used for salaries, prizes, awards, political groups. I think that we should have an item in there. Maybe not the prizes or awards, because some people like to do the, like for Rotary example, we buy the trophies for math field days. So maybe that'd be an eligible one, but the salaries and the political groups, that's likely a hard no. And then lastly is the appeals process. My recommendation is that we don't allow for an appeals process. It's just, it's not a guarantee that you're going to receive the funding when you apply. So that is really what I have, but I want to get your buy-in. If you can give us the parameters today on how this would work based upon some of these guidelines here, what we would do next is then bring back an updated resolution at the next council meeting for adoption, and then we would immediately start our application process and get that out there. So, Mayor?
Right, I'll open it up for council discussion. Anyone want to go ahead and jump in there?
Sure.
Thank you very much, Scott. That's been an issue. It's been quite a while trying to figure out the ways to do it. And Jimson, you guys had a great job. A couple of questions, a couple concerns. I mean, when you add in the mayor pro tem into that, does that put him in a difficult position too? Sometimes when you have elected officials that might have a connection. I mean, I sit on a couple nonprofit boards too that are very active in the community, but also, you put them in a position of deciding if these people get a grant or don't. My recommendation would be just let staff do it, kind of like we do with some of the other things we do, and decide if, they got our best interest. And if there's a question, they can then come back to us and ask. I could be wrong on that, but I think keeping us out of it, then there's no favoritism. It's based on the merit of what that actual ask is and whatever amount it is. On the CBDG, I agree and disagree. I agree that they're getting money, but it's for a special cause. When we're asking them to do CBDG money, that's usually stuff for our community that we're asking back. And we use Rotary as an example because we're both Rotarians. If Rotary was to get a $1,000 grant, would they not been able to get a table because we gave them CBDG money for a grant? I'm just using that as an example. Usually it's the Fine Food Bank, Martha's Village. We're not giving $5,000 or $10,000. It's groups. They're groups that are doing, $1 million worth of business and do a big service to us. So I think buying a table or something for an event that they might have is okay with me, because I think we're supporting them in a different way. That really should go towards, they shouldn't feel obligated to the city to give us a table because we gave them CBDG money to take care of the homeless, is what I'm getting at. So I think that should be an issue. 100,000, I agree. I think it should go back and forth, but I think there's events that we have already on the books that I think we're already going to go to. Like, let's use the History Museum. More than likely, I would say, there's no guarantee, but we've gone every year for the Day of the Dead and that. If there's certain events, I think those should be put aside, because we're more than likely going to go and let them ask if they come to us. But we know that money's already taken off the table, so that when you're doing it in 25,000 a quarter or whatever, or you're letting it run, you're hoping for 25 grand, you go through. At least then, hey, we're going to do the Day of the Dead. We go every year. They're a great supporter of the city. We've gone to celebrate, and it's our building. We're going to spend 2,500 no matter what. So that should really come off the table, because you should think naturally you're going to do that. Not there's a guarantee. It still has to be reviewed, but it shouldn't be part of it. And all of a sudden you're giving money out, and then you're taking away from other stuff when you already know you're going to go to some of these events that we normally go to. So I'd take that into account. But other than that, I think it's a pretty solid plan in terms of what we're doing. I do, like I said, agree on the 100,000 going back and forth. And then on the sponsorships, like I said, when we're talking about sponsorships, I think some of those do need to come back to us, because there's always going to be exceptions to everything. As COVID was a good prime example. And as we're doing things now, there was a lot of people that didn't have events, didn't do this, didn't do that because of COVID. And now they're slowly starting to bring in. So we're going to see a big difference. But when you have a great event comes to say, hey, we're not going to be a part of it because we ran out of cash, I think there should be a reason behind it. And if it comes through, those ones then should either be decided by the group, and if they feel comfortable moving it forward. If not, then they should bring it to the council and say, that here's the next one. We're at our $100,000 limit, but this is really going to support the people of hunger, homeless, helping with people find available places to live. We really do think the city should invest 10,000 or something like that. So those are my points.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Ramit, which has your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do have several questions. First question I have, does the proposed 100,000 plus 25,000 cover historical funding that we've done?
It sure does.
Okay. I don't have an issue with the 4 funding rounds. That makes sense. I don't have an issue with one place for everything to go to. I tend to agree with Councilmember Miller that we don't want to bring politics into this review process. So let's keep the politicians out of it. I do not agree with the reporting requirement. I just think it's fruitless. It's, if we do a table sponsorship, what type of report or quality report are we really expecting to get? So I don't think the report is necessary. And in response to the table sponsorships, these organizations are seeking city support so that they can showcase at their public events where they're raising funds that the city supports their efforts. Doesn't really matter to them whether we fill a table or not. They give us the table option, which we can turn down the table option and say, no, this is just a straight contribution that you may have requested. So I do take issue with the table sponsorship requests. The other considerations, I don't know why we're including CDBG in this conversation. I really don't, because CDBG funding is a council decision. It's not an application process. Eligibility of individuals, we've never given out scholarships, and I really don't want to start. Back to your individual seats versus full table, I really don't agree with that unless there's one event that didn't submit a request for sponsorship that would entitle us to a table, and certain personnel or colleagues want to attend an event and there's only 2 or 3 of them, then of course we would only buy 2 or 3 seats. But I don't want to bring it to the point where every time there's a request, we're going to be asking how many people want to go and how many seats do we need. It's either a sponsorship or it's not. I don't know that you can say 25 allocated per round, because most of the requests come in, pretty heavy in one part of the year and they're light in other parts of the year. So I would just say it's 100,000 rolling, and just keep rolling it out every quarter. Again, I don't support the written report. I don't know why major donations is in this conversation. $50,000 K cap. That's always been something that if somebody makes that type of a request, it has to come to council. It's not an administrative decision. Increase, decrease the $5,000 cap. No, I think 5,000 is fine. Annual budget, if you say 100 plus 25 is going to cover what we've historically done, then that's fine. I support that. And we've always said that funds cannot be used for salaries, prizes, awards, or political groups. And there's always been an appeal process. So what it comes down to is keep the politicians out of this, make it as neutral as possible. I don't think we need the report, and just make it a straight request for a sponsorship or a grant. And if they want to give us a table, then that's fine. We'll accept the table, but we don't have an obligation to fill it. So there's no need for any staff member to run around and try to find 10 people to attend an event. And those would be my comments.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Mahomes.
Sure.
Okay, pretty much aligned regarding the CDBG. I think that's a whole separate conversation and a separate consideration. So I don't think that should be a part of it. I also agree, let's keep the politics out. That should be staff driven. I really like the idea of having one place. I think there always was one place for requests, but this is kind of being reworked a little bit. And I think that's huge. Having the funding calendar 4 times a year, totally and completely support that. Hard and fast, 25,000 per. No, it's going to evolve. It's going to morph, especially the first couple of years. So we have that bucket and it needs to just be reviewed. Many of these folks on a reapply. I mean, I'm just thinking of some of the folks, they reapply year after year. So I don't think that's a hard and fast. That $100,000, let's utilize that to the best of our ability, spread across those requests. The $5,000 cap, I'm totally okay with. Also no on the scholarships. The whole table sponsorship thing, that's generally, I mean, you're offered a seat, whether it's the museum or CVRM or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, it's a donation. You get a table. So we either say, yes, we're going to give you $7,500 for the table. We either decide if we're going to fill it or not, because it kind of looks ugly if there's no one there, and just, make the decision to give them the dollars. But I think it's awkward when particularly a major organization comes to us and says, okay, here's the table, $7,500. And we go, well, we'll take 2 seats. Here's whatever. I just think that doesn't send the right message. So I think pretty much those are my comments.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see, so far I'm okay with most of what's been said. I agree with taking the CDBG part out of there. I'm okay with staff making those decisions versus elected officials. I'm okay with the 4 funding rounds. I'm just a little concerned that if we're not doing 25,000 each time, then aren't we just going to use up the 100,000 on the first round if that's how it usually goes? I'm just a little confused on that side of it.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done that, Oscar. We've never done that.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe just trying to think of how exactly is that going to work, right? If we're not splitting it up. I'm okay with the tables being individual, fine with that. If nobody's going to be going, we can always donate if we want to on top of it. But yeah, having the empty table, I think does look bad. Let's see, no report. I'm okay with no reporting requirement. And the one question I had is for making it only nonprofits and government entities. I'm wondering what the reasoning is behind that, because I know there's a lot of sports youth groups out here that aren't necessarily nonprofits that might be coming to us for funding. So I wanted to see what is the reasoning behind only having nonprofits and government entities.
Sure. Typically all of the sports groups that come through are represented by a 501c3 through the booster, through the school booster program. That's how they typically come in. But if you want to expand that to include, school programs or affiliations, where we can add that provision in there as well, as opposed to restricting it to a 501c3.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. Who are we? Have we always restricted it to 501c3s? Always been.
Well, that's what's in the resolution. But if I can recall, there may be, a running club, because there's multiple groups, sports organizations. Let's take Indio High School as their cross country and their wrestling team, and those would come through as different ones, not represented through the boosters. And we have funded those in the past. So technically we've allowed those, although the resolution states it's just 501c3s.
Okay. I might chime in on that if Roxanne might help us. If there's a risk to some degree of a gift of public funds, if it's a private entity, a for-profit entity, I think we would need some exchange of services, wouldn't we, to fund a private entity?
It depends on what the entity provides. Like, for example, the original resolution was set up so that we show that there was some value provided to the city, or that because of the gift of public funds issue. And so, for example, if these running clubs are not necessarily affiliated with the 501c3, but they're, consist of cross-country runners from the school, then that would be appropriate. But if it's purely a private entity, then you may run into a little bit of trouble. So I think it just depends on, and making sure that you have the purposes set out in the policy and what the entity is going to be providing in terms of services, either to the city or its residents, its educational centers. And that way you're able to expand that beyond a 501c3 as long as you put the policy together in that way.
Yeah, see, I think I would rather have that as part of the application and have staff determine if it would be, it would fit the criteria of what we're saying would be a benefit to the community.
Well, that's something we've done in the past, right? And we hadn't ran into any issues.
Correct.
Okay. Before we move on, I have a couple of questions, and we'll come to consensus on some of these. Can you clarify that the 100,000 cap? I know Mayor Pro Tem brought it up, how that will work. Just clarification.
So we'd use the $25,000 as kind of guidelines, if you will, per round, knowing that there's 4 rounds available. But we would likely see round 1 would probably reach to that 45 historical to maybe 50,000. But I don't think the goal here is to exhaust all the funds in round 1, because we'd want to open up for subsequent rounds. So I'd anticipate that the committee would be well aware of that and say, listen, we're going to do 50,000 round 1. And then that only leaves us with 50 for the following 3, but we don't exhaust funds, or else we're not holding up to our end of the bargain of having the 4 available rounds.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is the first quarter is everybody does it during season. So there is nothing usually from July to September, because nobody's out doing anything. A couple here and there. And a lot of it because of COVID, but most of the stuff runs because they want to bring in all those snowbirds in that are giving money that are here part-time to their causes. So, everybody tries to squeeze those in from those last months right after Christmas all the way through. So you're going to get a heavy fluctuation from there. I think there should also be a fluctuation too, besides when you get to the 100,000, because if they're worthy causes that we've done, then that's great. I mean, that means we've accomplished the goal we're supposed to. But if you get to the ninth month and you're out, there should be a mechanism where you come back to us and say, would you as a council like to put in another $20,000 and give us the option instead of just saying, well, we spent all the money. It's a great cause and bringing in one, ask for a budget adjustment or something. We could do it instead of bringing individual ones and then be able to go through it. Then we can decide if we want to use it. And if you want to use it or not, doesn't mean we'll use it. Just means the opportunity for those ones that came in later, if we're going to do the quarters, would have that opportunity to spend some. And then the council would have the right to say, yeah, we'd like to add money, or no, we're not.
Some good points. Also, I'm thinking, look at the application date, right? Because a lot of times you're going to see that application date. So they may apply in July, but the date of the event isn't until December or January. And so that may help, keep that figure, that allocation of funds.
Scott, could I ask, what timeline are we looking for this resolution? If we come to a consensus on everything, will it be on our next?
Yes, Mayor. Next meeting, we'd bring back the resolution for adoption.
Okay, because I think just the outreach, folks are used to August, right? So we got to move on August, but we have track clubs, we have baseball, we have activities in the springtime, winter, fall. So we could get out and start letting folks know, okay, look, you don't have to apply right now, or we could get you the funds in January when you need it. When do you need your funds? Because like the council member said, everybody's going to come in August. Folks are used to August. Folks are reaching out to us already for August. So I think that could probably help as well. Once the word gets out, okay, we don't need to apply now. So that's just, on that, but I'll start from the beginning so we could just get a consensus on some of these things. The CDBG funding, I think that goes without saying, we don't need that.
If I could, Mayor, just to explain that a little bit, because it may have got confused or I got confused. The idea is if we've given an entity $50,000 and they're asking for 1,200 more, the suggestion was we already gave you 50, so we're not planning on you being eligible for the 1,200. Is what you're saying is we can still consider the 1,200 even though we gave you the 50?
Yeah, I believe that what we can do is that's why we have the committee. The committee could decide, okay, well, we have 5 other organizations in front of them. Let's take care of them first and see what we could do on the back end, because it might be an organization that's very well needs the funding to have activities. So it gives the organization some leeway to work with that.
A lot of it too is they're providing a service. We're asking them to take that money and provide homeless things or meals and that. We're not asking them to raise funds. We're asking them to do a certain thing for us, and we expect them. That's the accountability. The CBDG, they have to come back to us and tell us what they use that money for. So I care it. We're asking them to do something for us. We're here. They're asking us, hey, we need to raise funds for the rest of our organization.
Okay. And as you go through the list, Mayor, just one other comment, because we appreciate as staff the trust and confidence to review all these, and we feel like we can do an adequate job. But just know that already in my year and a little bit here, I've sensed a disagreement. And in my mind, I can look at those that we have reviewed, where I think I know that a few of you would support it and a few of you probably wouldn't. And so there's a challenge you're placing on staff with regard to that. We may be even more strict than you in looking at some of these. There have been a couple of them where I recall in one instance, just as a background, hey, but we give $5,000 of scholarships back to students in Indio. I said, well, you're asking us for $5,000. If the city council wanted to give scholarships to residents, why doesn't the city council just give scholarships rather than giving it to you to give to them? So those are the ones that, at least as my personal view, if I'm on the committee, I'm thinking, that doesn't make sense to me. So having the policymakers there, I thought would provide a little bit of balance. Right.
Which policy?
Yeah.
The ones that agree with that one.
Well, that's why
you get us in the middle of something.
And I think we stole the Palm Springs example, but by having the mayor and mayor pro tem, at least all of you get a chance to sit and review. So one year we may fund something that the mayor pro tem and mayor agree to, but that wouldn't happen the next time.
Yeah, that's not right either.
I prefer to be out of that one.
Yeah, I think maybe they utilize them for maybe oversight. I don't think it may be decision making. For instance, if one of us sits on a board for a nonprofit or something, and it comes through and they do get awarded, that opens up a can of worms for people. That's just an example.
You'd have to recuse.
But that's just one of the things that we tend not to do. And if they come to us most of the time, and that's why I appreciate this process, we just email it to the city manager or Jim, talk to Jim, and every now and then I'll ask Jim for, hey, who did we donate to last year? Because folks will reach out to us. So streamlining this process, coming to one area is also a great idea. So, but the policymakers, I think we need to stay out of that. It just, and the full table, I think we should keep it at the full table. I understand and I appreciate having this conversation. Individual seats a full table. Sometimes we purchase these full tables and 2 or 3 of us show up. However, sometimes I try to send a rep or open it up to the city manager to send someone from the city. So I just hope we could do that because, we do have full schedules and it's just hard to make everything. Presence is good, but as long as we give the donation, I think that's the thing that matters. I think we went through that. Major donations come to council. We talked about that. No appeal. I support that. I did like the written requirement. I heard some folks say that they don't support it. So we are in a democracy here. So whatever the council wishes, I'm okay with that. But I just appreciated the written report. So they let us know, okay, this is what the funds are using for. If Indio track team comes to us and say, we need $5,000 and it's going to go to water, it may go to uniforms and it goes to that. It just shows accountability with the dollars that we're doing. So that's why I did support that. I did get I would get requests and then I would actually read. I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. They're letting us know where the dollars are going. So I do support the written report. The rest of it, I think it's good. I think the council gave good direction, and I think we have consensus on most of it. It was just a written report that I was supportive.
But shouldn't that information about what the funds are going to be used for should be part of the application?
Is it on
Right.
there?
So
Right.
Yes, sir, it is.
It's an
So the
application,
purpose-
correct?
Yeah.
the purpose of the written report, is there a different purpose for the written report?
Is it separate? Is it just a separate report or this is part of the application?
After.
This would be more of an event or an activity in which we funded, and they would come back and let us know how many people were attended and give us their type of numbers and so forth. So
Yeah.
it wasn't so much where the money was
Oh, okay.
spent, if you will, but how it went and what the impact was.
The
because
written report, when
It says a requirement of written report. That's why. So I thought it was before. I don't, if that's something that staff does working with this process, I don't have a problem with it, but I don't think we should require it.
Roxanne?
the written report was meant to elaborate and really stay away from the gift of public funds issue. So that way we know, exactly what Scott said in terms of numbers, and especially if it's not necessarily a new nonprofit that we know of. And so it was meant to support the reasons for giving the money. And if for some reason the event wasn't successful or the money was used for different purposes, that way you have a file that's meant so that when they ask for funding again, you have a history on that particular agency that requested funding. So certainly you do have the request up front on the application on what the money will be used for, but the report was just to provide almost a belt and suspenders type approach.
It just seems like we're just adding so much more extra work, and
Forever.
we're not really going to do anything with this information. And I mean, it's not like we have a full-time person managing these programs. So that's why I really don't support the report, because what does it matter if 10 kids were benefited by the community grant or 100 people attended an event to support the organization? I don't see what relevance that has to us. And we wouldn't do anything with the data.
Yeah. And I think our intention as well, so we give the donation and hopefully they're successful. And there's nothing we could do after that point anyway. So we will do away with that as well. So I think we're good.
We're good.
I mean,
Mayor, if I could just, maybe I missed it, but the appeals process what is the consensus for the appeals process?
I don't think anything is hard and fast or set in concrete. I know that really makes your job wonderful. You guys,
I say it is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's no guarantee.
Decision's final.
It's a grant.
Yep.
Yeah,
There is no
guarantee.
appeal.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for bringing this back to us. This is important to the community. I know I have reached out to Jim a lot for this, but this is great. And these cycles, it's good to give people opportunity throughout the year to apply for these grants. So thank you, Mr. Trio.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I just want to make one final comment because City Manager mentioned that sometimes these requests come through council members. In no way are we advocating for anybody to be funded when we pass these requests along. For whatever reason, some organizations feel comfortable sending their request to a specific council member. But I want to make it clear to staff that in no way does that mean that any of us are basically behesting or requesting that funds be given to an organization. We're just passing the request along for that process to happen. So there's never been a situation that I know of that a council member has said, fund this. Everyone has always gone through the process. So I want to make that clear because it even was a talking point that there's no circumventing the process. I don't know that we've ever asked for it to be circumvented. And I hope that staff doesn't feel because we pass on these requests that they should circumvent the process.
No, and I've had a couple come to me and I send them straight to Jim or the city manager. I never go to staff, and we keep that's part of the reason why we want to stay away from the committee, because it kind of convolutes that. So that's a good point. Yeah.
If I may, Mayor, if moving forward, again, part of the streamlining of this whole process, rather than send those to Jim or to the city manager, if we can send all those, say, email here, funding@indio.org, and then that goes to one spot, and then we can then take over from that point and explain the process and so forth. And by the way, we'll get all this new process out via social media, press release, and so forth. Make sure that the community is well informed of the new process.
So if we get one, would you prefer that we just email them back and say, like, let's say it's the rescue mission and send it back and say, send it to funding.org, or would you like us to send it to the funding.org and say, this was sent to us?
If you could have them send it to funding.org, that'd be ideal.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, it's for me, I'm a copy and send guy, so I'll send it to them and let them do it. It takes us out of the equation because I'll forget anyway. So, but I thank you and thank you for the conversation. So we will move on to the next item, which is item 4.2, water conservation outlook. Mr. Trejo.
I am Greg Trejo, IW. Let's see, is it on? Okay, here we go.
It is.
And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge my talented staff in the audience. That's Gloria Hernandez and Michelle C. And without them, I wouldn't have a nice presentation to give to you today. Very talented, very helpful. It goes without saying that there's a lot of news and a lot of media that's actually helping our efforts with respect to conservation. So today we wanted to give you a highlight as to what we're doing at IWA and how it all ties into our regional planning. So I want to start with a little bit of background and context as to how our conservation efforts rolls up to a regional effort. First is the 2022 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. That's really a water management plan that provides us guiding principles on how we implement our conservation program and what it means to our long-term sustainability of our groundwater. The second document is the 2020 Regional Urban Water Management Plan, which has a very specific water shortage contingency plan that defines the levels of conservation. So without these plans, most agencies would have some level of conservation practices. But what these plans do, it actually achieves a higher stage of conservation. There's 6 total stages in this program. And right now we're actively at stage 2, and it's all defined and driven by the governor, as well as the State Water Resources Control Board. And within these documents, we have 2 major assumptions that weren't previously present. Number one, we have defined a reduced delivery of the State Water Project by 35,000 acre feet. And the second one is an assumption that the Colorado River would be reduced by 24,000 acre feet on replenishment. And that's really to make up for some of the climate change assumptions. Collectively, those two items there total 60,000 acre feet. And in our region, that's about 20% of our urban water use per year. So we can achieve 20% conservation on any given year. We, to some extent, can achieve the reductions that we may see in the future. It's not to say we can't continue to conserve more. What does stage 2 mean? I think we presented this in the past, and what it means is that there's no outdoor watering allowed without for spray irrigation during daylight hours. So we're encouraging everyone to irrigate at night. Restaurants can't serve water upon request. You actually have to request that. We encourage use of non-potable water for construction if available. Active discourage overseeding. We have a reduced outdoor water budget to residents by the amount of 10%, which is communicated to them at every billing cycle with bill inserts and a lot of media, both in Spanish and English. We expand our public information campaign. We're doing that actively. Increase water waste patrols. In fact, this is part of the team that physically drives out, and we have our operations staff visibly looking to see if there's any wasters. We reduce our hydrant and deadline flushing, and the state added one where we don't allow watering a non-functional turf in commercial and industrial institutional areas. Very proactive conservation program at stage 2. I want to highlight our use as the City of Indio and Indio Water Authority as it compares to the rest of our neighboring agencies. This is the data that's reported each month to the state. For the month of May, you'll see that per resident, the gallons per day utilized in the Coachella Valley Water District for May was 244 gallons per capita per day. Desert Water Agency, 273, Indio Water Authority, 164. The month of June got a little bit hotter. Areas in Coachella Valley Water District and Desert Water Agency, by the numbers, clearly indicate they have more areas to irrigate than we do here at the Indio Water Authority. In part, it's because of the aggressive turf rebate program that we have, and also all the policies that have been in place since 2016 on the restriction of any turf being installed. This is a key metric for our team. And again, we're very business and metric oriented in our decisions, is that we've done a great job. And if you see any announcements of other agencies moving to $3 and $4 per square foot, this is an indicator why they have to go there, is to try to match the amount of conservation we have. Not to say we can't go there, and we will soon. I wanted to show you some of the recent areas that I personally, Gloria and Michelle personally drove. This is the 4 developments that we've been developing over the last several years. Montevina, Paradiso, these are random pictures of what you'll see. Terra Lago, Trilogy, and I tried my hardest to find some turf in some of these developments, and we did one. I should have put the picture. It was artificial turf, and the developers are on board. They understand that the more water we save, the more we can develop. So this is really good news on the questions that were asked. A lot of the vegetation that you'll see is also native, and we did look up the policies to ensure that 2 things are in place. Number one, the least amount of turf in the front. Now, it doesn't say no turf in the front. It's something the CM and I can work on next, is to ensure that the policy is solid. But by demonstration and by driving out there physically, we hardly see any turf. Second is the native plant use. And there is our planning policies and procedures does point to native use, and also attaches samples through CVWD has a list of native plants. So that's in place as well. If there's any other requirements that you wish the CM&I to speak to, we can do that to enhance our policies and procedure. I think the pictures are indicators of what's going on in our area. So the look ahead, the real reason we're here today is to share with you some of the, not only the planning documents that we have in place, but some of the ongoing conservation programs. There's a demonstration garden that we've had in the planning stages for several years now. And we believe that the fall or in the spring, the CV Historical Museum will begin the demonstration garden. I think that'll be a great site for folks to see how you can use native plants. The second one is that we just received an award of $190,000 for a conservation rebate program, specifically and only for disadvantaged communities within the city of Indio. So we'll be coming back to you on how we deploy that program. The third item is an area that we'd like to visit, and that is the supplemental water supply fee that we collect from new development. Currently, it's only allocated for a recycled water project. And talking to the CM and also his experience, we thought that reopening and restudying our supplemental water supply fee to also include a conservation program element, which has demonstrated over the years on how much water we can save, would be a next step we'd like to take. Not only would we continue to support the recycle water program, but we'd like to have additional dollars to support additional conservation to allow continued growth in our developments. That's something we'd like some direction as well. And lastly, this TCC, Transformative Climate Communities Program grant application. It appears that we're in the hunt for some of that money, and plenty of opportunities to have conservation as part of our water and energy efficiency upgrades. So the takeaways of our presentation today is we're continuing to abide by the regional programming and regional planning. Conservation, the box at the center bottom of the screen, is that water storage levels with climate change and additional conservation and regional projects yields year-over-year storage gains. And this graphic shows various scenarios. The top scenarios are scenarios that not only include climate change, but additional conservation and recycled water than we're doing today. The blue line actually indicates a scenario where if we stop any additional conservation, any additional recycled water, we would see a drop in storage over time. Bottom line is that this looks very promising. However, what I'll add to this is that there's a lot of assumptions that went into this planning. And every 5 years, we update the model, we update the data to assure ourselves that we're still on track on positive gains in storage. So with that, I'll pause for questions.
Couple questions. Thank you, Ray, for all the information. Thank you for your support too. Obviously, outdoor landscape is by far the largest, and it looks like we're doing a great job of that. And I see a lot of areas where I live in Heritage Palms converting to, hardscape, pavers and artificial turf. But, the ones that are there now that we have like control over, like some of our mediums that I noticed, like even the county's putting in date palms and everything else, which are heavy users of water and palms and that. And I know it's on our main roads. Have we thought about, other than our main roads, changing the landscape into different things at the cities? Because what I always get to is where people come to me, it's like, what's the city doing? We see your landscape, your light and landscape district we have out on 48 is a good example. The ones that has the oleanders, that was your heavy water use and that, they're all dead. We put in yellow bells and everything else. They're like, all you do is keep bottling things up and tell us that we need to conserve water. And you have water running. And I saw in the park in Miles the other day, in the middle of the day, running water. And people are like, we're supposed to conserve water. I guess the city doesn't have to do it. I think we need to lead by example. And some of it is on some of these main roads where they're doing it. It looks great. I love date palms. I love the way it looks and everything else, but maybe that needs to be in areas and we change some of our stuff in our light and landscape districts and show people what it's like. Maybe in that neighborhood, if we were to change that, it would have an example on some of the other people that are in that area to say, look, this works, looks good. Maybe we can do some stuff. But I mean, I know that's where the main is. The other thing is on our houses, and I know we do equipment, and I don't think a lot of people understand that, especially in our older houses. And, like water pumps, on your hot water heater. I mean, a lot of people I know, and I don't, I happen to have a water pump, but, they turn the water on because they want to, not this time of the year, but a lot of times of the year, they want to get hot. So they turn the shower on and they let it run and run and run until it gets hot because they don't want to jump into it. And we thought about small stuff. It's that small stuff that adds up that people are going to do, our flash heaters and that do stuff. Because we do have that program, but, I don't know how many people take advantage of, re-changing things out. But it's every little bit that'll help to keep going along with it. Because eventually we'll come to an equilibrium on everything, as you know. It can never continue to, because we're going to continue to grow as we continue to grow, even though they're going to be conservative measures. They're still going to use water. And as you have 135,000 people to 100,000 people, you're still going to use more water. And the goal is not to use any more than what we have. So, and I'm preaching to the choir.
Yeah, no, I can respond to all three items that I heard here. Number one is the daytime watering in our parks. And yeah, that's something that we're working with Mike Edgar. And it's a matter of now that we have policies requiring that we look at the irrigation times, we have begun some of the adjustments. So working closely with Public Works, Number two,
I may just chime in on
I'm
that
sorry.
one in that if it's functional turf, we've got a tough decision to make. So if we don't keep it flush, once they start playing soccer on miles, for example, we'll lose the turf. So we got to make a decision. The determination of whether it's functional or not is something we've been playing with.
I don't have a problem with it, but they're saying it's during the middle of the day when it's the hottest time at 2 o'clock in the afternoon where you're going to get a lot of evaporation. Is what they're saying is that, they don't have a problem with it running it. Obviously we can't run when they're playing, but at 6 at night and the other stuff, how much are you really getting that water at 2 o'clock? If you're just touching it up, that's what they were getting at is more, not that they were watering it because it's essential, but the time they were watering it.
Correct. And that's what we are working with Mike Edgar and Tim's group. And it's a matter of making sure that the awareness is out, and it is now. Anytime anyone's watering the day, they're the first to get the call, and we try to address it right away. So we'll follow up further on that. And it is to the CM's point, we do also need to ensure that we're mindful of Mike's experience in the event that we do stop watering. And that occurs to the turf where it dries out. I think our experts is something that we'll work with together, and it is a balance. As far as the inside the house, the water pump, definitely some of the areas that we're looking for any further opportunities. As I demonstrated the amount of water use in the valley from CVWD and Desert Water Agency and where we're at, there's a point where we start plateauing and there's only so much more you can save. But these creative ideas of what else can we do inside the house are definitely something we're looking for. The $190,000 we received, love to give some of that as toilets to the disadvantaged communities because there are opportunities to continue to save water inside the house. And then the last one, the medians, something that I'll work with our CM, and we have had that conversation, is how can we best continue to develop where it's not only water friendly, but attractive to the city. So something we'll follow up in more detail.
Yeah, I saw in La Quinta and then a lot of the roads they took out, but a lot of hardscape in, and then some drought tolerant plants, but a tree here and there. They left the trees as they were existing, but if they weren't, they added a specific tree here and there, but it really was a solid hardscape, and it still looks good. And I don't think people understand though, when you get rid of turf and you put in DG, it's still the same amount to maintain it. It's just a different kind of maintenance. You're not watering it. You're not mowing it. You're just having to rake it and clean other stuff up. So the cost doesn't go away. The goal is to just save the water. So,
good points.
Thank you.
Very good points.
Councilmember?
So I guess we've all noticed. I mean, it's a work in progress when there's a broken sprinkler or something and you see water. And I have no doubt the city's on top of that. Don't touch my palm trees. But I think what I was looking at years ago, we sat here on the dais, Councilmember Miller, remember? And every house had turf. How far we have come. I mean, we have made major strides. And I applaud the city of Indio for helping us make those strides, the development community, and we'll continue to make more strides. One of the things that I'm always concerned about is our trees, our canopies. Agree with more hardscape, agree with DG. But hardscape and DG just raises the temperature. And in this desert, we need some canopy, some shade. And there's different trees. I am not a tree person, I do not have that expertise, but I do know we still need shade. And I think there are options that we need to take a look at so that we can be water wise. And I'm sure you're doing this already, and still have a shade tree and something that is aesthetically beautiful, so that we can offer both, because it's just hotter and hotter and hotter, and the asphalt and the concrete and the DG, it just increases the temperature exponentially.
I absolutely agree to that. And it just comes down to having smart irrigation controllers that provide just the right amount of water, depending on the native species or type of landscape. So a big part of the savings is really having the technology in place and the right sprinklers in place.
Mayor Pro Tem or Councilmember Remy, do you have any comments or questions?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Hey, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, just thank you to our water department. I know they've been putting in a lot of work on our conservation efforts. And as Councilmember Holmes has said, we can see the very clear impacts of that in our community. I just wanted to mention we do have, native palm trees, native trees that we can use for canopy. And I'm really glad to hear about the native plants demonstration garden. I'm really excited to see that come to fruition. And I'm wondering if with the 190,000 that we have for the rebate program, if another option that we could have is having, we're doing the demonstration garden at the Sevia History Museum, but could we have a demonstration block, right, of homes that we do native gardening in, that we can show the community this is what a block would look like if we had native plants, and the impacts of that, not just in water conservation, but in supporting our wildlife, even just the bees, the hummingbirds, and which are in some ways really struggling right now to stay in this heat. And we know those populations are going down. So this is going to really help our community if we can push this forward. Other things, let's see, TCC application, we're great, glad to see that coming through. And I'm excited for next week when we have the state come down to see, to tour the area with us. And let's see, I think that's all I have. As Glenn said, most of our conservation that needs to happen is in the landscaping. And even though we are doing we are improving, we can still do more, right? And I think right now, at least from what I can tell, we're kind of suggesting to developers to use the native plants and to use these conservation methods. But I think we really just need to solidify it and have everyone, follow by the same rules. And as Glenn said, lead by example. I think we should have some policy that says all city developments should be native plants, right? I think we're at a point that we can do that, and hopefully also require it from any major developments, or maybe all developments. I'm not sure what downsides there would be to that, but I'm open to hearing out any opinions from our council members.
Great. And I'll close it out. In the interest of time, I'll be a little quick. Just thank you for this presentation, and thank you to our community and our developers for working with the city. Like it was said, we've come a long way. If you drive around any of the new developments and any of the old ones, a lot of them have desert landscaping, and it looks great. I have desert landscaping, and I will make sure that I will check my own gauges at home to make sure we're watering my backyard in the evening time, because that is important that we lead by example. But it does add up. It's power in numbers. If we're all contributing this, what we've seen in the numbers, it does help. And I think the TCC grant funding, if we get that, is a perfect opportunity to display some of that water conservation and give some of our residents and the Jewel community opportunity to do some of these things, because it's also going to help them as well. And so that would be great. I just think we need to continue on the outreach component of this with our residents and make it in some bullet points and some easy messaging that folks can understand. Okay, if I do these 5 things, it's going to save our community, our region, our state water, and it's also going to save us. And as far as the canopy versus, taking that out, that's, we have to weigh that, because, it becomes an energy issue as well with the climate. So, but I'll leave that up to the experts. And I think moving forward, we can continue to have you come and give us updates and things that we could continue to do throughout our meeting. Sometimes we only see water a couple of times a year, but this is some important stuff moving forward. Water and energy is going to be very, very important in the forefront. So I don't have any further comments or questions. So thank you, Mr. Trejo. Looking forward to working. Thank you for what you're doing and for your staff. And there's going to be a team effort, collaborative effort in our community. Thank you.
Thank you again.
All righty. So we will now conclude the study session and move into the closed session. So could I have a roll call, please?
Mayor, for the record, all council members are present.
All righty. Do we have any public comment for closed session?
None, Mayor.
All right. So City Attorney, would you like to take us to our session?
Great, thank you. The City Council will now move into closed session for the items listed on the closed session agenda.
All righty. Thank you.